Welcome to the Yield Tactics Podcast, your go-to source for all topics related to yield and revenue management, pricing strategies, and industry insights. We're diving deep into the dynamic world of revenue management and pricing across various sectors, with a particular focus on travel, leisure, transportation industries, and beyond. From airlines optimizing seat inventory to hotels adjusting room rates based on demand, and even to theme parks maximizing ticket sales, yield management plays a crucial role in ensuring businesses extract the maximum value from their resources. Joining us are Yield Tactics senior consultants and partners, industry experts, thought leaders, and pioneers in the field of revenue management, who will share their expertise, experiences, and innovative strategies to help you stay ahead in this ever-evolving landscape.
This podcast is brought to you by Yield Tactics and Airline Tactics, the foremost consulting firm specializing in revenue management and pricing, serving clients worldwide.
Welcome to this episode, Revenue Management for Public Services, Fixed Supply and Infinite Patience. In this episode, we're going to explore how revenue management, yes, that same science used by airlines and hotels, can help public services work smarter. It's not about making money, it's about managing demand, improving access, and delivering better service for everyone. Let's dive in.
The peak problem. Why managing demand? Peaks matters. Let me ask you something simple. Have you ever tried catching a train at 8:15 on a weekday morning? Shoulder to shoulder, packed platforms, delayed departures, people pushing in, headphones on, everyone's stressed. That's a peak hour in action. Now fast forward to 11:30 a.m., same train line, same stations, and yet plenty of seats, no crowd, smooth sailing, same infrastructure, different experience. And that contrast right there, that's the peak problem. Peak demand is a massive challenge in public services. Whether it's transportation, healthcare, utilities, or education, demand is not spread evenly throughout the day, the week, or even the year. There are always windows where the system is under immense pressure, followed by lulls where it's almost too quiet. And the consequences of this imbalance are real, expensive, and often invisible to the average user. Let's make it real. Public transport, cities design their entire infrastructure, buses, metros, staff schedules, based on morning and evening rush hours. Yet outside of those periods, much of that capacity is sitting underused. Electricity grids. Consumption surges around 6 to 9 p.m. when people get home, cook, watch TV, use the washing machine. But demand drops dramatically overnight. Why does this matter? Because public services have to be sized to handle the peak. That means bigger infrastructure, more vehicles, more personnel on standby, more operating cost. Even if that peak lasts only 10% of the time, we have to build for it. The metaphor I like is this. Imagine buying a car that can seat 10 people, even though you only drive alone 90% of the time, just because once in a while you give your cousins a lift to the airport. It's wasteful, it's inefficient, and it's unnecessary if you can manage the demand more intelligently. Here's the thing. In most public systems, we don't have a supply problem. We have a timing problem. The buses exist. The doctors are available. The electricity is flowing. The seats in city council offices are there. But they're often available at the wrong time. The time when no one wants to use them. And at the right time, when demand explodes, we're suddenly short on everything. That's where revenue management comes in, not just as a pricing strategy, but as a tool for demand shaping. This is about more than making money. In the context of public services, RM is about relieving stress on the system, improving user experience, and using resources wisely. Let's be honest, building more isn't always the answer. Expanding a train line or laying new water pipes takes years, millions in funding, and political will that isn't always there. But shaping demand, convincing even 10 to 15% of users to shift their usage by 30 to 60 minutes, can have an outsized impact. It can reduce waiting times, prevent overcrowding, and save costs. It's often the difference between a system that's perceived as chaotic and one that feels smooth and responsive. Think about it. If a city can encourage half of its freelance workers and retirees to travel after 9:30 a.m., suddenly the 8 a.m. metro becomes manageable. If a utility company can offer smart pricing to incentivize dishwasher use after midnight, they can avoid switching on expensive, polluting backup generators at 7 p.m. That's the power of timing. But here's the challenge. People don't naturally spread themselves out. We're creatures of habit. We follow routines. We cluster. We try to beat the rush, and ironically, become the rush. That's where incentives, information, and smart policy can step in. So when we talk about applying revenue management to public services, we're not talking about copying airline pricing models or squeezing citizens for every penny. We're talking about using data, behavioral nudges, and simple tools to gently steer usage into off-peak times. Because if we can get even a portion of people to shift their behavior, the system as a whole breathes easier. Resources are better used. Citizens have a better experience, and taxpayers get better value. In the next section, we'll define what this demand shaping really means, what it looks like, how it's done, and why it works. But for now, let's keep this one big idea in mind. In public services, the challenge isn't always delivering more. Sometimes it's delivering better, but at the right time. What is demand shaping? Let's get straight to the point. Demand shaping is about steering people, not forcing them, toward using a service at a different time than they normally would. It's a behavioral lever, a way to soften the peaks, fill in the valleys, and get a better rhythm between demand and capacity. If revenue management in commercial sectors is about optimizing revenue by adjusting prices based on demand, in public services, we often care more about optimizing flow, how people, time, and infrastructure interact. So what does demand shaping really mean in this context? Think of a city's public transport system. Peak crush between 7:30 and 9. Quiet again until lunchtime. What if the system offered off-peak discounts or loyalty points for regular travelers who ride after 9:30? Or nudging in the app, trains are quieter after 10 a.m. and your fare will be 30% cheaper. That's not a punishment. That's a smart, gentle nudge. And if enough people take it, the whole system gets better. This is demand shaping, the art and science of encouraging users to make different choices in time, to reduce stress on shared systems. Let's be really clear about one thing here. Demand shaping is not about reducing access. It's not about making services harder to use or pushing people away. Quite the opposite. It's about making the system more equitable, more efficient, and more resilient by spreading out when people use it. It's a mistake to think of this as just pricing. In public services, you often have multiple tools at your disposal. Information nudges, like showing real-time occupancy in trains or clinics. Convenience incentives, like pre-booking slots or offering skip-the-line access for off-peak usage. Behavioral design, like defaulting people to non-peak times when they book. Gamification, rewards, points, recognition for making flexible choices. And the benefits? Massive. Let's break them down. Better utilization of resources. If your infrastructure is the same, whether it's busy or quiet, then more evenly distributed usage means better ROI. Improved user experience. Shorter wait times, less stress, faster service. That directly impacts citizen satisfaction. Operational savings. You can avoid costly surge staffing, reduce energy use during peaks, and make better use of fixed costs. Environmental impact. Smoother flows mean less congestion, less energy use at peak, and fewer emissions, especially in transport and utilities. Faster delivery without new investments. Instead of lobbying for bigger budgets to handle the rush, you manage the rush with existing tools. But here's the nuance. Not everyone has the flexibility to shift their usage. We'll come back to this later, but it's worth flagging early. The goal of demand shaping is not to penalize people who must use services at peak times, like school children, office workers, or patients with acute needs. It's to incentivize the rest, the flexible ones, to help the system breathe. So, how do you get started? First, identify where your peaks and valleys are. Then, look for the users who could shift without major disruption. Finally, start experimenting with incentives, pricing, information, convenience that reward off-peak behavior. This isn't theoretical. Cities and public services around the world are doing this already, and in the next part, we'll open up the revenue management toolbox and show you exactly how. Because the future of public service isn't just about building bigger, it's about using smarter tactics to spread the load. The RM Toolbox for Shaping Demand in Public Services. Okay, we've established the problem. Demand is clustered, peaking at certain hours, which leads to overuse, stress, inefficiency, and often frustration for everyone involved. We've also defined the solution: demand shaping, the practice of influencing when people use public services to better match capacity and reduce pressure on the system. Now let's get into the how. In this part, I want to walk you through a practical revenue management toolbox, but not the typical one used by airlines or hotels. We'll borrow the spirit of those techniques, but tailor them to the public service environment, where the goals aren't just profit, but access, equity, and sustainability. Let's open that toolbox. Tool 1. Time-based pricing, off-peak incentives. This one's the most obvious, and sometimes the most powerful. You vary the price based on when the service is used to encourage people to shift away from peak times. Not punish, encourage. The classic example is off-peak pricing in transportation. A train ticket is £4 if you travel at 7:45 a.m., but only £2.80 if you travel after 9:30. A public swimming pool might charge full price during school holidays, but offer 50% off during weekday mornings. The trick is to design the pricing so that those who can be flexible are rewarded, without restricting access for those who can't. This doesn't mean massive price swings or dynamic pricing that changes every 5 minutes. It could just be 2 or 3 simple tiers: peak, shoulder, and off-peak. The key is that users understand the benefit of using the system at a better time, and that it feels fair. Tool 2. Capacity forecasting and dynamic slot management. This is one public services underuse, even though it's a gold mine. If you can forecast demand by time of day, day of week, or season, you can better plan and guide user behavior. A city permit office might forecast low footfall on Wednesdays and actively promote those slots when people try to book online. A vaccination center might pre-fill off-peak slots with volunteers or low-priority users, keeping high-demand times free for urgent appointments. A digital system might hide peak slots unless absolutely necessary, nudging users to pick calmer hours. This isn't about price. It's about designing the interface to shape behavior. Think of it like a restaurant seating system. If you know everyone's going to ask for 7:30 p.m., you make sure to seat some tables at 7 p.m. and others at 8 p.m. to avoid bottlenecks. Tool 3. Information nudging. People don't like crowds, and sometimes just showing real-time or predictive crowding levels is enough to change behavior. On a bus app, expected occupancy: high between 8 a.m. to 8:45 a.m., low between 9:30 to 11 a.m. On a government portal, expected wait time for passport renewal chat: 27 minutes now, 8 minutes if you return after 2 p.m. On a hospital self-booking system, most patients choose 10 a.m. Appointments after 3 p.m. tend to have zero wait. You're not changing the service. You're just making the timing implications visible. You're gently suggesting a better time, without enforcing anything. This is behavioral economics at work. When users feel like they're making the smart choice, avoiding queues, skipping the hassle, they're more likely to go with your suggestion. Tool 4. Behavioral defaults and smart booking paths. Sometimes you don't need to ask people to choose a better time. You just make it the default. When a user logs into a public service platform, instead of showing them all time slots equally, you highlight off-peak first. We recommend 2:30 p.m. Lower wait, easier parking. Or you pre-select an off-peak time in the booking system and let them opt out if they really need a peak slot. This is subtle but powerful. Humans tend to go with defaults, so by setting smarter defaults, you can shift a meaningful chunk of demand without saying a word about price or forcing a change. Tool 5. Loyalty programs and rewards for flexibility. This one's underused in the public sector, but it's worth considering. Imagine if your city gave travel credits to people who consistently rode buses at non-peak times. Even something simple, a digital badge, Smart Rider, Off-Peak Champion, can create behavior reinforcement. We do this in commercial services all the time. Airlines, coffee shops, fitness apps. Why not public transport? Why not government portals? It's not about gimmicks. It's about incentivizing small shifts in behavior that add up system-wide. Tool 6. Real-time load balancing. Now we get a bit more advanced. With the right data and system architecture, public services can actively shift demand in real time. When traffic surges in one call center, overflow calls are rerouted to less busy centers. When too many people show up at a testing site, they get offered a jump-the-line code for another site nearby. If one community center is slammed with visitors at lunchtime, digital signage and apps can push people to a quieter one 2 blocks away. It's the equivalent of traffic rerouting in Google Maps. Live adjustment to keep flow balanced. And while it requires more tech infrastructure, it's extremely powerful once in place. Tool 7. Communication campaigns built around timing. Finally, never underestimate the power of framing the message. Most public service campaigns focus on what or why. Get vaccinated. renew your documents, come to our job fair. But few focus on when. A subtle shift. Beat the rush, renew online after 2 p.m. Afternoon walk-ins, welcome, shorter waits. Night slots now open, book at your convenience. When the timing message becomes part of the communication strategy, you begin to build new habits in the population. Over time, people start self-regulating. They begin to understand the system better. They don't all pile in at 9 a.m. or Monday mornings, and that changes everything. Wrapping up, let's recap. You now have 7 practical tools for shaping demand through revenue management principles in public services: time-based pricing, dynamic slot management, information nudging, behavioral defaults, loyalty rewards, real-time load balancing, timing-centric communications. None of these require huge budgets. Many are low-cost, high-impact adjustments to existing systems, and collectively, they can dramatically reshape how and when users interact with your services. In next part, we're going to take these tools and bring them to life with real-world examples from cities, health systems, and utilities that have successfully shaped demand and smoothed out their peaks. Because this isn't theoretical, it's already happening. Case studies, demand shaping in action. We've covered the why, the what, and the how. Now it's time to look at the real-world execution, where revenue management meets operational creativity. This part is about proof, because it's easy to dismiss these ideas as too commercial or not suited for the public sector. But around the world, cities, hospitals, transport networks, and utilities are already using smart demand-shaping techniques to rebalance usage and improve experience. Let's dive into a few concrete case studies, each showing a different angle of what we've discussed. Transport for London, the off-peak revolution. Let's start with the classic, public transport. Transport for London, TfL, has long been at the forefront of time-based pricing. With their Oyster and contactless system, they've built clear peak and off-peak pricing rules, making it cheaper to travel outside of the 6:30 to 9:30 a.m. and 4 to 7 p.m. weekday slots. But that's just the beginning. During the pandemic recovery, TfL doubled down on behavioral nudging. They sent targeted emails to commuters, suggesting new travel patterns based on low occupancy periods, integrated live crowding data into Google Maps and their own app, so passengers could avoid packed carriages and pick smarter times, ran promotional campaigns that highlighted off-peak leisure travel, museums, walks, cafes, not just avoid peak, but here's what you can enjoy off-peak. The result? A noticeable flattening of ridership curves, especially in leisure and discretionary travel, and crucially, better network performance, even as passenger numbers rose. NHS appointments, smarter defaults in booking systems. The UK's National Health Service, NHS, is under constant strain, so making appointment flows smoother is mission critical. In several regions, especially for non-urgent services like blood tests or vaccination centres, booking systems were redesigned to default to off-peak slots. Users logging into book would see a recommended time, often in the afternoon or later in the week. Be shown average wait times by slot. 8:30 a.m. Wait 27 minutes versus 2:45 p.m. Wait 6 minutes. Occasionally be offered points-based incentives in pilot programs for accepting off-peak slots, tied to faster access to digital consultations. This led to a 13 to 22% shift in demand to non-peak times across various pilot programs, reducing queue times, spreading staff load, and increasing patient satisfaction. The beauty here? No price involved, just smart default design and data transparency. Singapore: energy demand, response, and off-peak discounts. Let's move to utilities. Singapore's National Energy Board piloted a residential time-of-use pricing scheme to curb peak-hour electricity usage. Instead of a flat rate, they offered lower prices from midnight to 6 a.m. for activities like charging EVs, running laundry machines, or cooling rooms in advance. Real-time energy usage dashboards that showed households when they were using energy at high-demand hours. An annual bonus scheme for households that managed to reduce peak load by a set percentage, encouraging ongoing behavior change. The results? A 5 to 8% reduction in peak hour load, with only a marginal change in total consumption. That means the problem wasn't overuse. It was when people were using. Demand shifted without sacrificing comfort, and the grid became more resilient. The Netherlands: spreading passport demand. Dutch municipalities noticed an issue: massive clustering of passport renewal appointments in the last 2 weeks before summer holidays. You can imagine the queues. So they rolled out a digital booking system with dynamic visibility. Peak slots weren't shown by default unless others were full. Clear messaging: renew before April 15th to avoid delays. Early bird slots that offered next-day pickup if booked before the rush, rather than the normal 5-day wait. Result: nearly 30% of users shifted to earlier months, smoothing the demand curve and drastically reducing summer overload. This wasn't tech wizardry. It was about planning ahead, communicating smartly, and tweaking the booking interface to reward early action. Helsinki libraries rewarding off-peak visits. Public libraries often suffer from the same issue as other services: afternoon rushes and lunchtime bottlenecks, while mornings remain underused. The Helsinki City Library system experimented with an optional digital stamp card. Users earned a smart visit stamp for coming between 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. After 10 stamps, they'd get a reserved reading room slot or early access to book releases. Live traffic data in the library app. Currently quiet, ideal time for study and browsing. The program was a hit among students and freelancers. Over a 6-month trial, morning visits increased by 18%, and overall satisfaction rose. No money involved, just simple behavioral nudges, status incentives, and timing transparency. Digital services in Estonia. Load balancing at scale. Estonia is famous for its digital-first government, but even with automated systems, usage spikes still occur, especially near tax deadlines, school enrollment periods, and voting registration windows. To deal with this, Estonia implemented soft caps on high load periods for certain administrative services. Users trying to access them during peaks were invited to return later with a skip-the-line code. A live dashboard of digital queue times, allowing citizens to choose calmer moments. Push notifications for registered users. Tonight, between 8 p.m. and midnight, high capacity available. File your declaration then. This dynamic balancing approach reduced server overloads, improved satisfaction scores, and avoided costly server infrastructure expansion. They essentially treated digital services like infrastructure, where demand management is just as important as uptime. Key patterns from these case studies. If we zoom out and look at all these examples together, we start to see recurring patterns that can inspire public service RM everywhere. Timing transparency matters. When people know when the system is under pressure, many are willing to adapt. Default design is a quiet superpower. What users see first or get auto-selected can shape behavior at scale. People respond to small incentives, from off-peak discounts to early access perks. Even modest nudges drive real shifts. Communication must include the when, not just the what. Timing-focused messaging can change usage patterns more than general awareness campaigns. Data enables real-time adjustments. Whether via digital slots or physical capacity, live feedback loops let you optimize as you go. These aren't isolated wins. They're repeatable, scalable, and, most importantly, they bring revenue management thinking into public service in a way that's user-friendly and aligned with broader policy goals. Wrapping up. So, where does that leave us? Demand shaping in public services isn't just possible, it's already happening. Across sectors, countries, and service types, we're seeing smarter systems that do more with less by influencing when, not just what, users do. The techniques are clear. The benefits are proven. And the good news is, you don't need to overhaul everything. Sometimes, a simple interface change, a visibility tweak, or a modest reward system is all it takes to unlock smoother flows and better outcomes. In next part, we'll wrap this series by exploring common implementation challenges, how to measure success, and how to build an RM mindset in public service organizations, even if you're just starting. Implementation, challenges, measurement, and building the RM mindset. We've made it to the final part of this journey into revenue management for public services. We've covered the philosophy, the tools, the principles, and the proof through real-world case studies. Now let's talk about what it takes to actually implement these strategies. Because let's be honest, no matter how good the theory, execution is where everything is won or lost. Common challenges when introducing RM in public services. Before we get into solutions, we need to face the obstacles that most public sector organizations will encounter when trying to shift toward revenue management and demand shaping. Let's break them down. First, cultural resistance. Public services often operate under the idea that everyone must be treated equally. This can lead to pushback when introducing time-based access, priority slots, or differentiated pricing, even if the goal is to improve fairness over time. A hospital might resist off-peak incentives because it feels like favoritism. A transport authority may worry that price changes will be seen as penalizing the working class. Reality check. Treating everyone the same often leads to worse service for everyone, especially at peak times. Revenue management is about improving access across the board by spreading demand intelligently, not excluding people. Second, data and infrastructure gaps. Many public systems simply don't have the real-time data needed to make good RM decisions. No visibility on appointment no-shows, no clear data on when demand peaks. Booking systems that aren't integrated or flexible. Without data, you're flying blind. Third, siloed teams. Demand management often requires collaboration between operations, IT, customer service, and finance. In public institutions, these teams are often siloed, each focusing on their KPIs without a shared goal. Result: you have smart people working on fragmented problems. 4. Political and media sensitivity. Anything involving pricing, prioritization, or behavior nudging can easily become political. Media headlines like "City Hall penalizes morning commuters" can derail even the smartest projects. So, how do you go forward? Enablers of successful implementation. Let's flip the coin. What helps public service organizations succeed when they adopt RM or demand-shaping strategies? 1. Frame it around outcomes, not revenue. Don't lead with pricing strategies. Instead, talk about reducing congestion, improving access for vulnerable populations, enhancing user experience, making better use of limited capacity. Revenue management in the public sector is not about making money. It's about using resources wisely and improving service quality. 2. Start with behavior, not systems. You don't need a perfect dynamic pricing engine to begin. Start with smart defaults, time-based visibility of slots, nudging campaigns to shift usage. If you shape behavior first, system upgrades will naturally follow. 3. Use pilots to de-risk. Try a 6-week micro-pilot on one location, one service, one user segment. Use A/B testing principles. Group A sees all time slots. Group B sees a system that recommends off-peak slots with small perks. Measure the shift. Learn fast. Scale what works. Fail quietly if it doesn't. 4th. Transparent and human-centric communication. If you're making changes, especially ones that impact access, communicate proactively, not in legalese, in plain, empathetic language. We're making mornings less crowded by encouraging early birds. Want faster service? Try booking Tuesday afternoons. Clarity builds trust. 5. Bring in operational champions. It's tempting to think this is an IT or pricing project. It's not. You need frontline managers, call center staff, clinic coordinators, people who understand user behavior and day-to-day pressure. They will make or break the adoption of any change. Measurement. What does success look like? You can't improve what you don't measure. But in public services, success is not always about revenue. So how do you know if your RM approach is working? Let's define the key metrics. First peak versus off-peak utilization rate. The core indicator. You want to see a flattening of the demand curve, fewer extreme peaks, better spread across time. Example, if 60% of bookings used to be in the same 3-hour slot, and now it's 45%, you've won. Second, no-show and dropout reduction. When users are nudged to choose time slots that work better for them versus simply what's available, no-shows tend to drop. A 5 to 10% improvement here can mean thousands of saved appointment hours annually. Third service, wait time reduction. Particularly for physical infrastructure like transport, clinics, or passport offices. If the average wait time at peak drops from 45 to 30 minutes thanks to demand smoothing, that's a win. Fourth, user satisfaction scores. Yes, some users may grumble about changes, but many will appreciate shorter queues, smoother access, better information. Track C, SAT, NPS, or complaint logs over time. Fifth, system throughput and capacity uplift. If demand shaping allows you to serve more people with the same infrastructure, that's a direct ROI in efficiency. Building a long-term RM mindset. Now let's look beyond individual projects. Let's talk about culture. How do you embed revenue management as a way of thinking in a public organization? 1. Educate broadly, not just experts. You don't need an army of pricing scientists, but you do need teams across planning, operations, comms, and policy to understand the basics of demand behavior. Build a shared vocabulary: peak, load, yield, occupancy, friction, dropout. 2. Celebrate data wins. If a pilot shifts 15% of demand off-peak, celebrate it. Make it visible. Show dashboards in internal meetings. Get people excited about small improvements. Cultural change happens when data success becomes part of the story. 3. Normalize iteration. You'll never get perfect timing, perfect pricing, or perfect nudging on day one. Make it normal to test, learn, and adjust. Monthly micro changes beat annual overhauls every time. 4. Link RM to sustainability and inclusion goals. RM can help reduce energy usage, avoid overbuilding, and improve access for users who previously couldn't compete in crowded slots. Show how RM helps align operational efficiency with social good. Closing thought: from static supply to dynamic demand. Public services were historically designed for fixed supply and infinite patience. Build one road, staff one counter, let the people queue. But today, we can and must do better. Smart use of data, behavioral design, and RM principles allows public services to become dynamic, responsive, adaptive, centered on human behavior, not administrative burden. This isn't about turning cities into companies. It's about respecting people's time, energy, and dignity by giving them systems that work with them, not against them. Thanks for following this deep dive into revenue management for public services. Whether you're a transport planner, a hospital administrator, a digital service designer, or just someone who wants smoother systems, this discipline has something powerful to offer you.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to catch every upcoming episode. And if you have any questions, comments, or topics you'd like us to cover, feel free to reach out to us.
Stay connected with us on LinkedIn and visit our websites yieldtactics.com and airlinetactics.com for more exclusive content and information about our consulting and training services. From our websites, you can download the Yield Tactics magazine for free, featuring in-depth articles covering topics such as organizational transformation, advanced pricing techniques, marketing, revenue optimization, and distribution. The ideas and opinions expressed by our guests on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or endorsements of Yield Tactics. Also, when we mention specific companies or products, it's important to note that such references do not constitute an endorsement by Yield Tactics, nor do they imply any business relationship between us.